The creators of Psycho and The Silence of the Lambs had wild imaginations, but their gruesome stories were unfortunately inspired by an even scarier truth. A real-life psycho called Ed Gein committed unspeakable crimes before dying in 1984. Gein was already a suspect for the murder of his brother when he started digging up bodies of dead middle-aged women who resembled his late mother. Gein had a horrific secret project. He was peeling off the skin of the corpses and using it to create a woman suit. He finally drew attention to himself when he killed 2 local women. When they searched his home, the police walked into what can only be described as the lair of a mad scientist. Human noses, vulvae, and heads were lying around, with home decorations being created out of body parts, bowls made out of skulls, and lamps and chairs upholstered in human flesh being only several examples. Gein spent the rest of his life in a mental institution after being ruled criminally insane. Javed Iqbal Mughal was a remorseless serial killer from Pakistan who killed more than 100 young boys. Mughal's sadistic tendencies surfaced when he was arrested for sexual molestation, with 2 young boys being his victims. Unfortunately, he was let out on bail after serving only part of his sentence. Mughal left prison aggravated and encouraged to act on his sick impulses. He developed a strategy of wooing boys and young men. He would lurk the streets looking for potential victims. When he managed to get the wanted attention, he would lure the unsuspecting boys, take them to his home, where he would proceed to drug, rape, and finally, murder them. He wasn't done with them after he killed them. He would go on to dismember the lifeless bodies and dissolve them in hydrochloric acid. The remains ended up in the sewer system. Mughal was caught because he kept the clothes of his victims as trophies, which were eventually discovered by the police. The Vampire of Sacramento is not a fictional character. This is a frighteningly appropriate nickname for Richard Trenton Chase after his vampirism became public. Chase had a history of abominable behavior. He spent time in a mental hospital for hunting down small animals and eating them raw. Chase's repugnant behavior escalated when he started killing humans, drinking their blood, and eating their body parts. Chase admitted to having abducted 6 people, killing them, and sexually assaulting their corpses. Afterward, Chase would eat the bodies, often making milkshakes out of the flesh by mixing it with Coca-Cola in a blender. He used the blood of several of his victims to fill up his bathtub and bathe in it. Chase was finally caught after he murdered and devoured an entire family. He was sentenced to death, but took his own life in a prison cell before he was executed. Dennis Nilsen was a loner who craved human company, but his deranged mind didn't allow him to engage with people socially. Instead, his impulse for keeping company was satisfied in other twisted ways. Nilsen managed to lure young men into his home, where he would capture and murder them. The kill itself was not Nilsen's goal, it was the preservation of the bodies. He would keep them in his home for several days, using them as bunk buddies. The sleepovers would end when the stench of the corpses became too much to bear. He got rid of the bodies by burning them and eventually flushing them down the drain. Nilsen was caught by chance when the pipes got clogged. His neighbors complained about blocked drains, and the plumber decided to have the pieces he found causing the blockage analyzed. The plumber's shocking discovery that found what were actual human remains led to Nilsen's life imprisonment. Gilles de Reyes was a celebrated military captain in the 1400s, but as it turned out, he had a lust for violence, which went beyond military action. De Reyes had sadistic homosexual desires, with young boys being his favorite prey. De Reyes lived in a castle, which was an appealing, luxurious home boys were easily drawn to. With a taste for blonde and blue-eyed male youngsters, De Reyes would lure his unsuspecting victims with stories of sweets and other kinds of treats piled up in his castle. When he would finally trap the unsuspecting children, he would torture them, most often stabbing the jugular vein and squirting the blood over himself, which would lead him to ejaculate over the dying children. He would later bathe in the blood of the boys, who died in the most horrific conditions. De Reyes would later whip himself and pray for forgiveness in the family chapel, but the remorse he felt was not great enough to make him break the gruesome habit. Ted Bundy was a handsome and charismatic man who was no stranger to chatting up girls. Unfortunately, the young woman he would seduce found out about his heartlessness and sadistic tendencies only after it was too late. Bundy approached girls in public places, faking injury or disability, and he gained their trust with his light flirtation and fake vulnerability. As soon as he got the girls alone, he would transform into pure evil and kill the women in cold blood. He would hide the bodies so that he could revisit them, raping and dismembering the corpses out of a sick obsession. Bundy confessed to murdering 30 people, but the police suspect that that list is much longer in reality. Bundy had moments of breaking his own pattern, and it is known that he broke into several houses and bludgeoned people to death in their homes. Bundy was arrested several times and managed to escape, only to finally be caught and executed at the age of 42.